Hello, Tile friends. Welcome back to another episode of Tile Money, the podcast where I, Luke Miller, discuss the business of tile installation. Today, I'm super excited to be sitting down with Rod Catwick. And Rod is a tile contractor for out of Utah, and he also has some innovative products, Rod Cat foam pans, as well as a couple other things. So we're going to talk about that. And Rod was recently mentioned in the member spotlight in the February 2019 tile letter. So a lot of what we'll talk about will touch on that, but I encourage you all to go check out tileletter.com. If you don't know what tile letter is, it is put on by the National Tile Contractors Association, and it's a great letter. So we'll talk a little bit about that. How are you today, Rod?
I'm good, Luke. Thanks for offering this or asking me to do a podcast with you.
Of course, yeah. I'm happy. I'm excited that you were willing to, and I'm a fan of yours. I just installed 2 of your pans, so that went well.
Nice.
Yeah,
Perfect.
Yeah, it was a solution to a problem, so that's good. So before we get into the meat of your history of tile, what's something personal you can tell us about yourself? Do you have any hobbies or unique things that nobody knows about?
You know, probably the people that follow me the most know that, I'm always making something, So a hobby for me is going out to my shop here in the backyard and doing something, So, having the CNC foam cutter, 20 steps from my back door, I can go in, and whether I'm making, a piece of furniture for my kids to use for a school play, or, a different piece or an idea, it's sad to say that that's my hobby at this time, but, it is. I'm working on, getting back into, riding my 4-wheelers, camping, skiing, so I'm kind of taking more steps into not being so one-dimensional and being, the tile-crazed innovator like I had identified myself as for, the last few years. And, especially with social media, where no matter what time of day, if all of a sudden, you're working on something cool or somebody has something, you're just constantly, tuned into these people,
Yeah, it can be an issue for us tile contractors. Huh? Well, it reminds me, though, of a saying, and I'll probably butcher it up a little bit here, but find something, that you enjoy doing, that you love, and you'll never work a day in your life.
Yeah. And that's it, So, that's, for me, creating something always, helps me get in the moment, if I'm just, sitting on the couch, I'm thinking about something and building monsters, and, especially us as tile contractors, there's so many different things that come up, where you're, thinking about, oh my gosh, did that grout color right? Is that shade good? Do I have enough tile? So being able to turn that off, is something that, that making stuff does for me. And now I'm practicing just turning everything off and practicing stillness. So, I don't know where we'll get on this podcast. As far as I've told you before, tile money to me is an oxymoron. It's like Granny Rapid.
Right.
So, I've loved tile, and I'll kind of get into my story if you don't mind, as far as,
Sure.
what got me into it, and I, ever since I can remember, 3, 4, 5 years old, I grew up in my parents' custom cabinet shop.
Right.
So, at the young age, I remember my dad, flipping all the breakers, and me and my brother would, climb inside these giant machines and, pull out sawdust and sweep and vacuum and clean the shop and save the scraps and build shit, and so, I was always building and making stuff, and when I was 15, I was, the size I am now, a little bit stronger, but I was actually kind of the foreman of the back of my dad's shop, and I would cut on the panel saw. I would cut boxes all day long and assemble them, and, just looked forward to the day when I would jump into my parents' cabinet company and, be an owner, operator, whatever it was, but part of that. And that's all I knew, and all me and my siblings knew.
Yeah.
And, my sophomore year, my parents sold their cabinet shop.
Oh, they did. I was going to ask.
Yeah. So they sold their cabinet shop, and they told me, by the way, you can't work here anymore. You're not old enough, the insurance and all of that. And
wow.
I remember at 15 years old, thinking, oh my God, I've wasted, and it gave me a little bit of anxiety, actually, of what I was going to do. And I had a high school friend that had he had 7 older brothers, so he was the youngest of 8 boys, and his father was a tile contractor, and all 8 brothers had their own tile companies.
Really? So eight separate companies, or something?
Yeah, 8 separate companies. Okay. And when the dad had a job, which was only a couple times a year, okay, every son, their helpers, everybody would go and do this job. And you can imagine going into something with 7, 8, 9 crews, and it was like 40,000 feet of tile in these dairies that we would do. Wow. And it was a weekend project. Yeah, so I kind of learned from these brothers and their mentality. But the day I did it, the first day, and I knew, we're going to go set tile in this house. And when the brother picked us up and there was a cement mixer on the back of the truck, it was like, what in the hell is this thing, And we backed in and, started carrying in the lath. And I'm pretty sure I got cut that first day by carrying in the metal lath.
Hard to believe, yeah.
And so, we started mixing mud, in the mixer. And that was the days when it was, we would bring buckets of sand, so it was sand, cement, and lime. And we'd make this mud. There was frogs in our mud from the sand, from the sand pile. And they started floating these walls, and it was like, this is flipping wild. These guys are just carrying all this cement, this mud into this house and putting it on these walls, and it didn't make any sense to me at all, and it's something I would have never imagined what was behind the tile, Yeah. And I had been in construction, but mostly in the cabinet shop. Maybe had I been, more out on the installs, I would have, seen these guys getting mud all over our shit. But anyways, I knew from that day one, that's what I was going to do for the rest of my life. I didn't ask how much money they made. I knew they did all right. The dad had a nice house, brothers had nice trucks, everybody was good. But I really liked it. I really liked how tile went up, and it wasn't even fancy in those jobs or in that time. It was white or almond 4 1/4, and once in a while you'd turn one at a 45-degree angle and run a stripe, but it was something I really, really liked from the first time I saw it.
Yeah. That's really a cool start to the tile industry. And I like how you said from day one, I knew that would be my career. That's pretty cool. I know, let's fast forward here. I know then you went out to California and worked with a cousin or a relative.
Yeah. So I did. So, I was a couple years with these brothers, and that was mostly tract houses that we were doing. And they were doing a mall. I was 17 years old, knew everything. So I had moved out from my house. My parents always supported, my dad was grew up with immigrant parents, his dad was from Holland, my grandpa, and then grandma from Switzerland. And her dad was the cabinet guy, old school, went to Germany, mastered it. And so my dad always kind of let us as kids know that, 16 years old, you should know if you're going to go on to college, if you're that kind of person, or if you want to go into the trades, And so what was happening is my friends were a couple years older than me, and they were graduating, and they were working tile full time. And they were making more money than I was able to make just working part-time.
Yeah.
And, you know, so I dropped out, went to night school, did that. But then, so back to getting me to California. So I got to work when I was 17. I had to move out, and I started working nights tiling a mall. They were doing a local mall here in Utah. So I'd work with the brothers in the day and then doing the mall at night. And there, all I did is grout it, char black grout, 80,000 square feet for like 6 months, dude. I mean, I was just, yeah. I would bring my friends in, you know, as long as I could keep up on the grouting, these guys would let me set tile also. So there was, you know, public restrooms. There was the partition walls in between each one of the restaurants in the food court. And that's where I really got to start setting tile, you know, and I moved up to like $5 an hour, you know, being a tile setter. So that company, we went from the mall to a house in Lake Tahoe up in Incline Village. And that was my first taste of these starter castles, you know, just these giant custom homes, you know, and it was right on Lake Tahoe. And we did the whole exterior of this house in a travertine. And so I was, you know, 17, 18 years old. And Utah was slow, and my parents were, hey, you know, your cousin's got a tile company just outside of San Francisco. You should just, you know, go west instead east next time you leave that job.
Yeah.
And so I called my cousin, and I was 18, he was 28, and he was doing really well. Had 7 or 8 crews, union tile contractor in Northern California, doing just giant houses.
Yeah.
And he was really cocky. And I called him, and I'm like, hey, it's your cousin. I'm a tile setter. I want to move to California, you know. And he's like, well, how much do you make an hour? I'm like, $10 an hour. And he's like, oh God, there's no tile setters in Utah. There, you know, I'll give you $7 an hour, but you can live at my house free, you know. So he was single at the time and had my nephew who was 8 years old living with him. So I moved down to Northern California, and I didn't realize at the time that I had moved in to a really nice area. You know, I was used to, in Utah, a commute in Utah at the time to go to work was 15, 20 minutes. That was your commute. You know, you had rush hour traffic, 5 or 6 miles of it, whatever. But, you know, I had this Utah mentality, moved to Northern California, and it was like, oh, this is awesome. You know, we wake up in the morning, drive 15 minutes to these big houses, go through the gate, do your work, go back home. And some of the guys that worked for my cousin would talk about their commute, you know, and it's like, what is this commute that you're talking about? And they're like, dude, if we don't leave our house by like 5:45, every 15 minutes is another 40 minutes to our commute, you know?
Yeah.
Like, what? And so, you know, learning tile from my cousin and from, you know, 19 years old, let's say, to 21, those 2 years, you know, I had gotten married, you know, had a kid, and had to find my own place to live, which was 30, 40, 50 miles away. Welcome to the world of the commute, man. Like, and I mean, you have a commute, don't you, where you're at?
Not where I'm at. Well, miles, but not traffic.
Right. Yeah. It's just, it's so crazy, you know? So I had, you know, everything that I loved about California, you know, moving there and the big houses and just the vibe and the quality and craftsmanship of the trade was so awesome. But then to have that new wife and that new baby, and a starter home was $300,000. And my parents were here in Salt Lake buying houses for $40,000 for rentals, you know. And it's like, oh my gosh, you know, I think we better move back to Utah, you know. And I dreaded it because I had only envisioned that mall or those tract houses, you know. I didn't know too much was going on. So I got to Utah. My parents had bought a house, and we gutted it and tiled it, you know, and I went all California, dude. I mean, the tile in sync with all the little horse teeth around it, you know, and just everything we were known for, you know, mudded everything. And tile guy lived up the street, you know, and I'd see his truck pass once in a while. And I knew him, you know, he was a high school friend of my brother's. And so I called him one day and I'm like, hey, I moved back here to Utah and I'm ready to start working for you, you know. And he's like, who says I'm hiring, you know? And I'm like, well, you probably should fire someone then. You're going to want to hire me, you know. And he came to the house and saw, you know, all the mud work that I was so proud of and stuff, you know. And he's like, all right, you know, it's cool. You got a job, you know, or whatever. And we started going up to Park City. And at this time, you know, I guess this was about probably 1990, 91, 92. And they just started making these new developments up in the ski resorts. And they were these ski in, ski out houses, you know. So have, you know, the tunnels and the bridges and the ski runs and, you know, just big money. And it wasn't people from Utah that were building up there. It was, you know, people from California, from New York, Chicago, you know, it was second homes, you know. And so I got up there and I kind of, that guy had fizzled, but there was another bigger house going on up there. And I got in with the company that was doing that bigger house. And day one of that house, the contractor came up to me and he's like, all right, what the hell's the story here? What's going on with you? Where did you come from? And I had my helper, and it freaks me out when I look at you because my helper looked exactly like you.
Really?
I had my helper from California move here with me.
Yeah.
And so we were in that rhythm, you know what I mean? We had, you know how fast things go in California, you know, I mean, you're floating 2 tubs, vanities, you know, all that. So we had that, you know, and mind you, I was 22 years old. So you're just, you know, wanting to just conquer the world. And so, you know, I told the contractor, hey, I just moved here from California, you know, and he'd called the boss and he's like, hey, I only want these guys to come up here, you know, they can move through this house quick enough. And so we kind of took that house, and the owner of that house, he had put out all these fires in Kuwait, Kuwaiti oil fires, you know. So because of him, he brought in his buddy from Texas that was like the CEO of Dr. Pepper. And that guy came and he's like, I want one of these here log homes out in the middle of nowhere in Texas, you know, and hired that contractor. And the company I was working for said, you know, if you want to follow him, you know, it was 2 years worth of tile work. They're like, if you want to follow him, go ahead, and as long as you're licensed and you know, doing everything legal, you know, we're fine. So that's kind of my first job as Catwick Tile. You know, I went to Texas for 2 years and lived out in the middle of nowhere, dude, in a tent trailer in a log Hummer garage, while everybody else was in like double wide. So there was like 22 guys on this whole project for 2 years building this thing. So that's kind of what elevated me to, you know, what my tile company did, you know, or whatever. So I just went from those kind of homes, and I just always kind of stayed up at that level.
Okay. Yeah, that's really interesting. So you were in Texas for 2 years, and then you ended up back in Utah, right? After that?
Yeah, back in Utah.
I know you got your license at about 23, I believe the article said.
Yeah.
So take us through that stage of getting your license. You know, you're back in Utah. It sounds like, you know, maybe you met some good people and had a couple nice homes under your belt already.
Right.
You know, a lot of guys wonder like how to get a start, and you've already, I mean, what a great story. I really enjoyed it, and I know everybody else has too. So now take us through that transition of, you know, of all the, you know, the heartache and also the positive things of starting. Right.
Yeah. So Texas kept me in control because I would go down there for 16 days and fly home for 5, you know.
Okay.
With that contractor, you know, they knew the next one that was coming up or whatever, you know, and had I have just been content with myself and my helper at the time and just focused with that one particular contractor, you know, I could have that's where, if I could go back, that would probably be the place where maybe scaling at this level, it's very hard, So now I got back to Utah. The contractors went two ways. One did a house for Al Unser Jr., the other one Kiefer Sutherland, and it was, either are you going to go to Montana or to New Mexico, Okay. No, I got a new family, I'll stay in Utah, and so I started hitting up these other these other builders. And because of the reputation I had for the work I was doing and what was getting ordered, the tile companies were referring me a lot also. Okay. And what I failed to do was to learn how to say no, so I would commit to a job, and hire a couple more guys, and, I got us up to about a 5-man band, a couple of the guys that worked in Texas with me that were finish carpenters, they joined forces with me. And probably many of you tile guys know, if you're going to get somebody to start tile with you, a finish carpenter is a really good guy because they know plumb, level, square, miters, stuff like that. So these finish carpenters turned out to be really good tile guys, and again, it was, old school, floating. So they all learned to float. We got really good. We got really efficient, but then we got more work. So, it's like, okay, I've got these two contractors here. Now this other guy got us in on this. And so you start building this monster, and so now I'm 26, 27 years old, going through this, and, I get more guys, I all of a sudden got now, dude, with a 38,000 square foot house, that just the entry alone was 5,000 square feet of 36 by 36 cremamar fill. The doors were from a castle, and you could open those doors and drive our trucks inside and turn around in the entry of this house.
Wow.
And it got like completely overwhelming, because I had that house plus 2 or 3 other ones. Before long, I brought in, at that point, at first, those first 5 guys were just close guys that I knew, from that. Then I start bringing in other guys, and then they know guys, and they got cousins and cousins of cousins and shit. And all of a sudden, you've got 22 employees, And on the big house, I would get a draw every month for $60,000 was my draw on that house, and I would owe $64,000. It was like, this sucks. I got divorced. I'm living in the basement of one of the clients of houses that I tiled, and it just unraveled and unraveled. But we were still doing the work, and we were keeping up. We got the 2002 Olympics, so now there's this mass rush to finish and build, again, these giant houses, and they're corporate houses for companies. And it's like, if we're not in this house for the Olympics, shoot a flaming arrow into it, because we don't want it, So again, more guys and more employees and more shit. And I'm not set up for that. I'm not that guy. You know what I mean? I need, all these different kinds of managers. I had a payroll company, I had accountants, I had a few things in place, but I didn't have the managerial skills. You know what I mean? My favorite place was inside that shower, stacking those walls. It wasn't babysitting. It wasn't that. So I think I was telling you here, I can tell a lot of guys here what not to do, or at least what didn't work for me, because it appeared, when you saw my trucks and the stuff, it appeared I was kicking ass. I mean, it looked great, and that's where I had met my second wife, the wife I have now. That's everything to me. She was the outside salesperson for the granite slab company that was doing the big house. Okay. And I met her, and she thought I was cool. I had all these guys were doing all this shit, and I remember I took her out of town, and I took her to where my parents lived in southern Utah, and I wanted to marry her, and I wanted to make sure that she didn't think I was this loaded baller, you know. And I just remember telling her, I just want you to know I love you, but I don't have any money, man. You know, I mean, I have these skills and these employees, but, you know, I'm barely getting by. And she's like, oh no, you know, it's obvious, you know, but it's all good. So that was cool, you know. And then a thing that had happened, Luke, is kind of during all this craziness, I had one home in particular that was like a hunt. And the owner of this house, the only way I could do the house is if I set every piece of tile myself, you know, what this owner. And the money was there, and you know, he's watching my brick phone blow up and all that kind of shit. And he told me, he's like, you know, I've owned and ran several restaurants. You know, he's in the restaurant business and has restaurants. And he's like, you know, we had one of them one time get away from us, a fancy Italian restaurant. And he said, we decided that we were going to only serve half as many people, but we were going to double our prices, you know. And he's like, have you thought about that? He's like, have you thought about just doubling your prices?
I love it. Yeah.
Yeah. So, you know, that got me from 22 guys back down to 5 or 6, where that was my sweet spot, you know, just running 5 or 6 guys, you know.
I love that. Yeah. I want to go back to something you said. You know, you had this 60,000 income coming in on one of those projects, but you had 64 going out.
Yeah. Oh yeah. God, I wanted to offer the best benefits, trucks, you know what I mean? I wanted to treat every guy like how I wanted to be treated, you know. Little did I know I was actually hurting myself, you know.
Yeah, that's incredible. But you know, it's good that you mentioned these things and are open, because that's how so many of us end up being, you know. I myself have been in that same situation, you know, not to that level, but maybe we could say like 6,000 and 6,400 or something like that.
Yeah.
You know, but it doesn't matter if you're in the negative, you're in the negative. And then the opposite, fast forward to that good advice that you got was, hey, it's better to make 10,000 pay, you know, 10,000 draw a month, but have 5,000 of it going into your pocket, not be negative.
Yeah, keep it.
Yeah.
You know? So yeah, that bigger isn't better, you know. And I think you know, being able to do super high quality custom tile and being passionate about it is a curse. I hate to say it, but you know, so I've been in tile, you know, 35 years now. I'm 50 years old. Some of these guys that I started with now, they're cooling the engines, you know. They're waiting for things to slow down. They've got, you know, a house in Cabo, a paid for house here, and a cabin, but they suck as tile guys. I mean, they don't know the quality and the stuff that we learn, you know, especially like following along on these pages that, or, you know, these groups that we do, you know, the level that these guys are doing, you know, whether it's, you know, from mitering, you know, just the stuff that the guys do on these pages, opposed to the guys that are going in still to these tract homes, that are going into these gas stations, these Chevrons, these jobs. B grade tile pays better than A grade tile, you know. And I think, and you know, I'll kind of turn on what got me turned off of where I was at, basically, you know. And you know, I don't know if many of these guys experience it and stuff, but once you get to these levels of these people, you notice a big disconnect with this type of client, you know. So, you know, 30 years ago, the jobs I was doing, you know, these millionaires were people that, you know, made filtration systems for Pepsi. You know, they owned toy companies. They owned companies that made stuff that worked with people. And it was this connection to, the value of people and this and that. And at the end here for me, it was just the perfect storm of assholes, so to speak. But at the end for me, it was about 3-4 years ago, I was on 2 giant houses, and they were basically .com people, very, the stuff you see every day and the hundreds of millions of dollars and stuff like that. That was these people, and that was their lives, And it just didn't seem to me like they were really authentic or the kind of people that I liked. Problems to them was, oh my God, I can't believe you laid 2 of those gray colored ones together, and it's like, I don't think you realize we carried this in during a flippin' blizzard. Half these pieces are chipped and frozen and stuck together that you shipped in from Seattle, that, what I mean? So you're dealing with, and they don't want to hear your story. They don't want to hear excuses. And I learned, that, but just inside, I just started, I just started not liking these kind of people, and the anxiety that I would get every day coming into the job once the architects and the designers and the team had been there, and it's like, what aren't they going to like? Why is there blue tape on those 3 pieces, and stuff. And it was starting to eat me up, and the 2 jobs that I was doing for the bad people, they decided that they were going to quit paying their draws starting in November because they saw that they weren't going to be in their houses for Christmas. They just wanted these houses for Christmas. Well, it wasn't our fault. We had designers from Seattle, architects from Seattle, designers from Houston, builders in Utah, and nobody could figure out what all these people wanted. It was just wait and wait and wait. Yeah. So, I would have guys there all day, every day, but nothing for them to do. So money got held up on these 2 jobs for November, December, and it was basically all my money. I still had to pay all my guys. I still had to do everything. Yeah. And I remember telling the contractor, I'm like, dude, this is bad. This is none of our faults. And I said, I'm doing this because of you and our relationship. I'm like, you got to cut me some money, and it's like, hey, these guys are into me $400,000, Wow. And after that, like I said, I was like, you're lucky cousin Eddie isn't coming to my house for Christmas, because these owners with that big red ribbons in the living room getting their asses kicked, and it was just enough for me. It just, I couldn't take that.
Yeah.
And I still continued to do business, but I started looking for ways to get out of it.
Yeah, and I think the takeaway from that story is, friends, at some point we have to decide what we're best at and what we're best suited at. Like Rod was saying, not everybody's meant to run a 20-man crew. At the same time, not everybody's meant to install meticulous, handmade tiles or lay out, design work, so we need to start, and from Rod's story here, we see he tried several things. So I would encourage all of us to try things, test the water, so to speak. But if you feel like, you're getting way out of your comfort zone and you're starting to lose that joy, like Rod said, he's losing his joy. He's not happy anymore. What do? You don't just keep doing the same thing over and over. You might want to change something. So that brings us to your change in your career, kind of, right?
Yeah, that's great. I'm glad you're kind of keeping this going along. So perfect. And I'm sorry, guys. I'm known for making a short story long, so bear with me. But
no, I'm enjoying it, and I know everybody else is too. There's a lot of good info here.
Perfect. Thank you. So because I did, know. I knew what things should cost, and you have those jobs where it's like, I'm just going to throw this dollar amount at it, and if I don't get it, that's all right, Yeah. And so I had just an addition on a house to do, and they just added a section to their house, and the shower had $100 a foot glass that was going in on it. And the hell with it, if I'm going to buy this much money in glass tile, I'm going to charge this much money in labor, because if I screw it up, I got to buy it anyway. And so the price was ridiculous. And the contractor, who was a friend, he's like, this price is ridiculous. And I'm like, well, maybe they'll change, the tile and stuff. I said, I really don't want to. I know glass, Paul has coached me many times through glass. I know what's entailed in glass.
Yeah.
Anyways, I get the job, and I'm doing the job, and I make friends with the owner's wife, the gal of the house. And she's like, my God, she's like, we're used to paying a lot of money for things, but when this tile price came through, really, and the builder both said, you're the one that has to do this job, me. And if you want to go a different direction in material, of course, the labor will go down. They're like, no, we had to have that material. It meant we had to have you. She's like, so, I've seen, all the, from our designers to the contractor to the architects, all fancy high dollar people, driving up in their fancy vehicles and their fancy clothes. And she's like, all of a sudden you pop in, and she's like, first off, I thought you were there just to deliver the job, or, one of the workers. And she's like, then I find out you're the owner of this company, and she's like, I think you've got a great thing. The job came out really good. And she's like, I'm a business coach. And later I found out that all these rich, bored ladies turn into business or life coaches or whatever. Yeah, they all go to these Tony Robbins things, so I guess I was her little practice person. Yeah. So
I'm glad you brought that up. I'm glad you brought this up. Good.
So I go to her office in Park City, and I have the paper right here, guys. I dug it up because I can't get rid of. And so anyways, she sat me down and she asked me, she said, okay, we want to work on Catwick. We want to work on the image and the brand, I said, okay, that's good. And so she's like, what does Catwick bring to the table, and I'm like, quality tile installation, and how are you different from other companies was her second question here, and what makes me different from other companies is, because of building things, and hers was one in particular where we, took these pony walls and a bench and the slope of the floor and a niche, and we kind of just incorporated it all together, based on layouts, based on elevations, and that was the magic. And she saw it, her husband saw it, and so that's what I had told her, and so she's like, okay, so she wrote right here, you integrate high design with function and you build it, and it's like, yeah, that sounds like a pretty good tagline, So then she's like, wave a magic wand. What does your company look like in 1 year, 5 years, 10 years? And in 5 years from then, and that was 2013, I said, no employees. I'm like, I want creative freedom. I want to just go places to show people what to do, help them get through it, to achieve it. But I don't want this burden of employees and payroll and this is wrong and this is that, So that was what kind of got me that way, And so she's like, okay, here's your assignment. I want you to go out next week. I want you to think what you can do where you won't need any employees, what's up. So that week I was telling you earlier, experimenting with poker chips. Yeah. I used these poker chips to create a 3D look on this Calcutta. And it was for a fireplace that I had to do for another designer that we were using a company's wedged tile that came 3D, but it didn't come in the Calcutta, And she's like, God, is there any way you can recreate this? And, yeah, I can do it, So again, initially I'm thinking, okay, am I going to hot glue a piece of tile onto the back of this thing at an angle? What am I going to do? And, Story says how I was doing a deck with some wedged pieces of foam, and it's like, shit, let's slap this on the back, And so I do that, And I do that over the weekend after I'd met with her like on a Friday. I do that over the weekend. And I'd made these sample boards that were pretty badass. And on Monday, I took them to another job, you know, and I'm like, check this out, guys, what I did with this 3D.
Yeah.
And the brick mason's like, oh my God, that's so cool, but that's so hard to do. And I'm like, no, I did. I put this foam on the back. And the guy's like, go get that patented right now. He's like, don't work here today. Just go get a patent on it. And the superintendent of the job, he has a few patents, and he gave me his patent lawyer's business card right then.
Nice.
So Tuesday, I have an appointment with this patent lawyer, you know, and I go in there and I show him everything and explain to him everything. And like, all right, I think it's something you can do. He's like, let's do a search. You know, it takes like 2 days to do a search on if it was possible or not. And he's like, let's do this search. So he calls me up, you know, Friday morning, and he's like, hey man, he's like, you've got something here, you know, this is pretty cool. And so on Friday, I go back up to my appointment with my coach, you know, and she's like, so how's it going? Did you put any thought into, you know, what we were talking about? And I'm like, yeah, I said, I came up with this thing to make tile 3D, you know, and her glass was all 3D too. So she kind of knew the expense.
Okay. Nice, yeah.
I'm like, I came up with a way, and I showed her the pictures, and I said, I actually already reached out to a patent lawyer, and it's patentable. I think I can patent this. And she's like, what the fuck are you, Forrest Gump? What? He's like, my coach said go out and do something, you know. So it was pretty funny, you know, that I was
made her day.
so quick. So I sent her. She had me text her those pictures, you know. So I sent her those pictures, and on Friday night, that night, her and her husband went out to dinner with another group that owns some really big Las Vegas hotel chains and stuff, and they're friends of theirs. And she's like, you know, taking the credit. Oh my God, you should see what my client came up with, you know. And she shows this client, or she shows her friend these pictures, and they're like, this is major. This is something big, you know, something that we would use.
Yeah.
And so then my coach's husband, who knew me from Tile in the House, he's like, this guy doesn't have the money that it's going to take to really get this thing going. He's like, have him come to our house tomorrow, and I want to learn more about this, you know? So she calls me up, and so Sunday I go up there, and it's pretty trippy to be right there with like your business coach, Shark Tank into her husband, you know, all of this kind of stuff. And, you know, he liked it. She liked it. It was cool. And he's like, tell you what, he's like, I'll put X amount of money for you here. I want 20%. And my wife is your business partner. She's the manager, or she's the president of it, you know, or whatever. So he was able to give her something to do too, you know.
Right. Okay.
And, yeah. So, and these people were brilliant. They were marketers, you know. So if you see 3D Stone and Tile's video, he made me that video and stuff, you know. So
okay.
that was the start of 3D Stone and Tile.
Nice. And what year was that?
I'm going to say 2013.
Okay.
Yeah. About 2013 is when we started getting that going.
Okay. Cool.
And then,
that's a great story.
Yeah. And then it's a matter of, now that you have this product, you've got to show it, you know. So for me, it was going to the local showrooms, you know, and saying, hey, I can take your tile here, put this backer on it. And they jumped right on it, you know. So I was able to get some feature walls in the tile showrooms, which helped me get traction, you know, for designers, for other tile people and stuff like that.
Right. Okay.
So that was that guerrilla marketing, you know. And Henry Rothberg, he was intrigued enough about this that he had asked to visit me at Surfaces that spring, you know, in Las Vegas, you know. So we went in and met with him, me and my partner Diana, and showed him, the stuff, and he had even his own, look on it, and it was like, not everybody's going to use this to 3D a wall, but in my house, I'm doing, porcelain tile with a thin glass mosaic, and this is a perfect shim. He's like, I see this as a shim. So when you've got Henry Rothberg telling you, hey, I see it as this, you better listen, or it's wise to listen. So, I appreciated that. And I sell more of my backers, through trading companies and stuff, as more so as shims than as a 3D, application.
Yeah. And I know you've had a couple more inventions too along the way. And one thing I love about the tile trade is we're so innovative. And it's interesting, you came up with this to solve someone's problem. You didn't just say, well, there's nothing I can do, or whatever. You're like, first of all, you said, I'm going to do it. You gave her information, right? You're like, yeah, I'll come up with a way,
Yeah.
So you had confidence that you could, and then you were working with the foam product, and you had your light bulb moment, and you just ran with it. I think there's a lot of innovators in the tile industry that'll be really interested to hear this story. It's really it's very motivational.
It's pretty cool, and once you do come up with a product, though, the first thing a guy like me is like, oh my gosh, I'm going to be a millionaire. This is great, but things don't take off like that, and stuff. So, that was great. It was a good product. It is a good product, but it was these guys that were buying it were like, hey, just so you know, bro, you'll make, $50, $10, $100,000 on this, but this isn't your $1 million home run here,
Yeah.
And so what happens, though, is, us in our trades and the innovation and stuff like we were talking about is, so now I have this foam cutting machine, and it's CNC and it cuts foam, and I can cut my wedges and stuff. And then I decide, or I have a job where I had to cut the backs off of Schluter metal, and they wanted just this flat strip of jolly that they laid on top of this piece of concrete, and I had to cut the back off. And my daughter now has the job that my wife did outside sales at that same marble and granite company. So I have a 25-year-old daughter that's just like the flipping all-star of sales on these kind of houses. And she went with me on a Saturday up to this big job, and we were going to water jet all these floors and do all this, metal inlay. And just before going up there, I threw a piece of foam on the top of one of our DeWalt saws, and I used it just kind of as a table so I could run that cut of that Schluter metal, and cut it all back without it all falling down into it. And as soon as I did it, it's like, oh my God, we can make these tables that go on top of, the trolleys here of these saws for cutting these large planks, and I saw that, right then. But I had, 15 minutes to get to this meeting, so cut that piece of metal, I'm driving with my daughter up to this job, and all I'm thinking about is this table, and we get in there, and this designer I'd met her a couple times at this house already, and this designer had taken her ideas of this house and what to do just way outside of where this owner wanted it, and it was a single guy with a lot of money that had just got back into town to see what she wanted to do with this house. And so we lay the metal, we show everything, talk about water jet. We were going to water jet like a spider web shape, in this whole like 3,000 feet of the main part of the house. And he wasn't into it. I didn't give a shit, or whatever. It was more of a pain in the ass to me. I'm sick of this. I wanted to do stuff for tile guys. Yeah. So we're driving home, and my daughter's like, oh my God, Dad, that's so depressing. You know, that was so much money in a job. That was beautiful. It's like, oh no, honey, I got this other idea. You know?
That's awesome.
Yeah, and you know, I put together that rip table, and having, you know, my distributors set up, you know, I was just it's Steve Sprung in particular with Russo Trading in Midwest, and he's the guy that that took an interest in me and kind of coached me, you know, with products and development. And, you know, it was like, hey, check this out, Steve, I've got another product, you know, and they jumped right on it. And Steve's the one, at that point, they called it the Rod Cat Rip Table, you know, and so Steve kind of made that brand or that name, you know, but again, it's being able to pivot and to just keep coming up with these little things, guys. I mean, it's, you know, once you get this piece of equipment and you can start thinking, okay, what can I do with this for our trade? It's pretty damn cool what having, and I'm very lucky to have this stuff, but it's pretty cool to be able to, you know, do stuff for other tile guys to make their job easier, you know, and that's what I'm passionate about now. That's what I like to do.
Nice. Yeah. I like that. Yeah. Great story. Where could people find these products? How about the table? Where can people buy or purchase that table?
So the Rod Cat Rip Table, Russo, I think still has it. They've kind of taken it out of their catalog and let contractors direct run with it. So Mark Roca had a pretty brilliant way of tying it onto a DeWalt saw and offering it as a package. And so that's a good place to get it, is through Contractors Direct. And then for my backers, for the tile backers, those are available through Russo Trading in Midwest, you know, so just go on that. And then as you know now, it's turned into the tile trays, you know,
foam, the shower trays.
Yeah. So the foam shower trays, you know, and that was again one of those things that it's like, well, man, there's all these foam trays out there, you know, but they're a certain size, and with my machine, I bet you I can figure this out. And you know, I was able to develop a way of cutting and making a custom shaped one, which has led to a patent, which has led to licensing attorneys and, you know, more stuff. But it's pretty fun. I'm rolling with this one. So between all of these things, I was able to ask my wife, you know, how much money do I need to make per day to make our nut, you know? And it was a number that was very manageable. And that's what I set my sights on. And, you know, I achieve it most every day. And I no longer think in terms of millions right now. I've dumbed it all down. I've poured my half full cup into a smaller cup now that's full. And, you know, now I'm really happy, you know? So for me, that's what all the suffering and, you know, doing everything that I've done through the trade and everything it's led to this, you know, the connections I've made through time.
That's awesome. I'm so happy to hear that, Rod. I'm happy for you. And I like what you said, you know, dumb it down. And I tell guys all the time, the way you come up with your price is to work your way backwards. How much do you need? You know, if you can't even, you know, I say, how much do you need every year? But let's just talk about, you know, everybody knows, what do you need every month? You know, just figure that out and then break it down to weekly and then daily. Like you said, hey, what do I need? You know, on average, this is what I need. This is, you know, and then what does the company need? So it's a pretty simple formula when you work it that way.
It really is. And it was my wife that had kind of, you know, put it that way. And it's like, wow, you know, if I know what my daily, you know, burn is, so to speak, or, you know, earn to burn and stuff. And, you know, after that, everything else is, you know, money in the bank, basically.
Yeah. And then, you have a website for those pans, correct? Yeah.
So that's Rod Cat. So if you just go to rodcat, rodkat.com, you can basically get on there and navigate. There's a guy I met on Tile Geeks. It's probably one of the smartest guys I've ever met in my life. It's Chase Twitchell, and Chase is the guy that'll teach himself CAD and teach himself 3D printing and teach himself website making, and Chase made this, but if you guys go onto it and kind of navigate through it and see how you can order a tray and get pricing and stuff, it's really been helpful for online guys.
Yeah, it's a really simple process, that's for sure.
Yeah.
Wow. So I have to ask now, you said one of your goals back in 2013 that you wrote down was to not have employees.
Yeah.
I know now you have a handful of employees, is that correct?
You know, I just have two. I have a husband and a wife, and in our shop, in our cut shop, you know, we take probably about, I think I'm at about 4,000 square feet, and that's where I've got, you know, the water jet and a strip cutting machine and a bullnosing machine, you know, and then a DeWalt saw. And then I've got next to it, you know, the CNC foam cutter. Yeah. And this husband and wife team run that, you know. So, you know, the good thing with the foam cutting is, you know, it's not rocket science, you know, it's push a few buttons, you know, make a program, and away you go, you know. And if something goes wrong, it's a $20 mistake. It's not like, oh my God, we're going to sue you, we can't get that tile anymore, you know, stuff like that. So it's been nice having those two, and you know, I don't have all those unforeseen material costs or the price of labor. You know, I know how long it takes to cut a tray, opposed to how long is that guy going to be in that master bathroom, you know. So, you know, I do have two employees, but that's enough. Okay. And that's why, you know, it was Bradford Denny that had me read a book called The E-Myth Revisited. And have you read that book, Luke?
Yeah, I love that book. Yeah.
Yeah. So it was, once I decided that I was going to build a company that I could sell, yeah, you know, and it by being able to sell a company or license a company meant I didn't have to have all of those employees, you know. And I really listened to that and followed that. And Bradford, if you see this, thank you so much. I've recommended it to so many people, you know. But just being able to see that, and now kind of going down this road of licensing what I have, you know, because to the right person, you know, they have the capabilities of, you know, not just making Rod Cat, you know, foam shower trays, but they also, you know, in their towns or their locations and stuff, they'll find, I mean, foam's the future, fuckers. You know, I say that so much, you know. Out here, there's so many, you know, freeway overpasses. There's and everything you see behind so many things now is foam behind it, you know. So, you know, it doesn't seem like a green product, but when you dig deep with these guys that actually, you know, have these factories and own and do, you know, the way it's recycled, the way it you know, it saves on fuel costs, the things that it does, I don't think it's going to go away, you know. And the more that everybody learns about, you know, the advantages to it, you know, opposed to other ways, you know, it just helps in building, you know. So look around, and in your town, do you see much foam? Do you see outsides of buildings covered in foam, tops of roofs? What is it where you are?
Well, yeah, we have, I don't know about tops or roofs, but I know, you know, for years they've been using it for like stucco,
right,
pop outs and stuff like this.
Yeah.
Yeah. And things of that nature. So yeah, I'm, you know, you're starting to, you know, once your eyes are open, you start to see more of it. Like you said, even with these larger construction builds that you would think foam wouldn't be able to support, you know?
Yeah. All the stadium seating in these theaters, you know, and stuff. So, yeah, it's been pretty fun. So now I think that's kind of my new passion. You know, any chance I get, I kind of read, you know, as much as I can to understand more about foam. But yeah, it's fun.
That's cool. So there's a question I want to ask you here, and I'm stealing this question from another podcast I listened to,
right,
called How I Built This. But how much of what you've accomplished in your life here would you attribute to luck or hard work? Is there a percentage, or?
You know, I would say, you know, the hard work is what keeps my head above water. but it's the luck as far as these connections, running into people at the perfect time. It's got to be 50-50, you know.
Okay.
And you know, people call me lucky a lot. I try not to really try to schedule anything with somebody as far as if I want to show them a new product or whatever, because everybody's so busy right now that I think that if sometimes you've scheduled this meeting and they're not quite, you know, you're kind of spamming them, so to speak, and it's just like, oh, I gotta go at this. But if you can just go for it and just at that right moment shoot into that office or drive up to that job and stuff, and I get lucky more times than not that way, just kind of following my intuition and just, you know, the right place at the right time.
Nice.
So 50-50.
Okay, nice. Well, that's a good answer. And I know there's an old saying that says the harder I work, the luckier I get.
Yeah, there you go.
But it's also like you said too, when you making the connections, and I think there's been times in everybody's life when you made a connection and then you walk away and say, shoot, why didn't I get a phone number or an email? Or you mentioned David Rothberg. I was at Tice last month and he spent a good 30 minutes visiting with me, and I walk away and I'm thinking, no picture, dummy.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
In the days of the selfies. But thankfully, the next day I met him again, and he was kind enough to take a picture with me.
Yeah. You know, and you get in that moment too, you know, where it's like, oh, that would have been perfect. But yeah, it's pretty nice. And then I really like, you know, I like talking to you off camera a little bit and kind of following you in this, you know, ride that you're on with this whole other angle and stuff, because again, the tools that you're going to provide and the insights, you know, whether it's some goofy guy from Utah that's all over the place telling you what not to do, to a guy like Paul or Ron Nash. There's luck. Ron Nash, living in the same state, being a friend like he is to me, is I don't know if it's luck, a blessing, or whatever, but you know, we had him in our shop when I had a bunch of guys here, and you know, for 4 hours he gave us a talk, and when it was done, you know, it was like our brains were melted. There was so much valuable information, you know, and you kind of giving a place now where you know, a Ron Nash, where, you know, potentially, you know, thousands of people can listen to a Ron Nash talk, or a Paul, you know, and Robert Davis. You know, there's so many of these great guys that you're interviewing, and you know, being able to now offer that to people in our industry, I think it's pretty cool with what you've putting together here.
Well, I appreciate that. Thank you, Rod. Yeah, before we get off too, I think it's worth noting here, friends, and I want to bring you back to this tile letter. You know, there's several photos of Rod in the tile letter. Some of his younger days when he had more hair, and then
the Rick James days, the 80s.
And then there's a few photos of some of your artwork, and truly you are an artist. That bullet inlay thing, I think I remember seeing that years ago, maybe on John Bridge or something.
Yeah, that's when I first posted it. Yeah,
can you tell us a little bit about that? Because I know it said you've sold multiple of those.
Yeah, that was a pretty cool job. That was for my neighbor's parents' house, and my neighbor's parents, he was CEO of a company called Consol Energy in Pittsburgh, and I didn't realize his parents had the money that they did until I got to this house. When I got to the house, it was another tile guy that was always doing this contractor's house, and he had his sights set on this thing from day one. It's when things were a little bit slow, you know, and people were pretty, you know, now people are passing jobs back and forth, but back then it was a little bit tighter, you know, and you're protecting your turf, so to speak. And so when I first walked onto that job, you know, the parents had always talked about me tiling their house that they're building. When I first walked onto that job, the contractor definitely wasn't into me. You know, he had his tile guy, which was a guy I knew, and their teams of designers and all of this, you know. And there's a thing, there's manners in this business, and I've always kept in my same lane, so to speak, as far as, what jobs I do and take. And I've never really gone after a job, but there's powers, and if you have that connection with that owner, that's, you can't get between that one, and then, so I felt good about knowing I had that job, going into it. So I got in there, and it was, me when I had, 4 or 5 guys, and just really running a nice, perfect, tight ship. And we're doing everything that the designer had picked out, and I'm finding out from my friend that his mom isn't really crazy about the decisions that the designer's coming up with, and stuff. And she was, finding it. I'm like, we don't do our designs based out of something out of a magazine. What we're doing for our designs will be in the magazine next year. Basically. Cool. So I kind of started taking this job over a little bit by little bit. You know what I mean? So contractor couldn't do anything. We were doing everything, perfect to trade standards, even maybe a little bit, a few more steps than his guy was doing. And we got downstairs and we got to this gun room. It was this giant gun room, and it was the first time that I really kind of went off of not doing what the designer wanted, this chick, and she was awesome, but she didn't have any current photos of badass gun room floors, and we're in the gun room, and she's like, this is a special room to my husband. It will have all of these John Wayne guns and all these things, and it's more of like a museum in here, and we really want to surprise him with something really neat. What can we do, and I don't know how I came up with it, but I just right then I was like, well, let's just cut bullets and do inlays, of spent shell casings in there. And, a lot of times I open my mouth and say this stuff before I actually know if it will even work, And, they just started, the families, big hunters and stuff, and they started bringing bullets, and everyone on the jobs would bring bullets, and I remember my nephew, just showing him on the tile saw, how to cut it. And it's like, just wear these glasses, wear these gloves, and squint and pray the whole time, and we got through them, and that came out so good, and it introduced me to mosaic tape, mesh mounting, and that job just right there, because it got seen by a lot of people, and then that contractor, it turned out to be one of his signature homes, so he'd walk people through it. And in our area, we have a lot of what we call white trash with money, so we've got just these rednecks that own gold mines and coal mines and drill oil wells and stuff, and they're all into that, so wow. It's pretty cool, and then I'd even get calls from other contractors that were like, hey, so-and-so saw this bullet floor that you did, can you at least provide the bullets and stuff for, the other tile gun. Yeah. But yeah, that was a fun one. And that's the same family that in that picture, you'll see where I did the train tracks, of the mining.
Yeah. That was pretty epic.
Yeah, it was pretty cool. It's, it's borderline cheesy, but again, when you know where it's at, where it's going, a theater, a playroom for people in the mining business, it fits.
Yeah.
I definitely wouldn't probably do it in, Palm Springs or something. What the hell?
No, you never know.
Yeah.
Right on. Well, yeah, I encourage everybody to read that letter, tileletter.com, the February 2019 edition once again. So yeah, really cool. Let's see if I missed anything here. Oh, your quote here. I wanted to just read a quote here that you said in the letter, and then maybe you can expand on it a little.
Right.
You said, the best things I have ever made in the tile industry are the friends along the way. I thought that was a really cool quote.
Oh yeah, and that's it's so true. With the social media, the John Bridge Forum was that first one. That I had got on Facebook and started getting tile friends on Facebook, and he kept telling me, oh, you've got to go to this John Bridge Tile Forum, and I went there, the first couple of times, and I didn't quite know how to navigate it and get into the threads and to that. And once I did, that was it. There was no more pokerstars.com for me. There was nothing, for me on the internet as far as just following that thread, and watching guys like Trask, so you've got Trask here, who's a big supporter, and he is the god of tile crazed innovators, and so I would just go back and back and back on those threads, of craziest tile work and stuff, and see all the stuff that these guys were doing, and you start recognizing these names and getting these people that, and then came Paul, and Paul always posted glass, we were all struggling with how to cut this glass and install it, and then came Mick with MLT, and Goose, so all of these guys that kind of collect, together, because of their passion for the industry, and now we've got this connection to them at our fingertips, basically, so that's been a big deal to me. I've done 4 or 5 projects where I've brought guys in, from Joe Leonard from Pennsylvania, just guys all over, and it's like now, no, I don't need 15 employees. I'll have 6 tile geeks and their guys come and help me on this job in Scottsdale, and that's not a bad way to go, guys. Any of you guys that are
network,
worried, and I know guys are seeing that now, but you can get, with help from other guys.
Yeah, utilize the connections that you make.
Yeah, exactly.
Very nice, very nice. Well, Rod, I think we covered a lot. I know I really enjoyed this talk. It was really fun. Thank you for joining me here.
Oh man, I appreciate it. Thank you for having me.
You're welcome. I look forward to keep getting to know you.
Okay, I'm sure we'll meet again.
All right, Rod. Well, enjoy the rest of your weekend.
All right, thanks, man. Have a good weekend.
Yeah.
Bye.